Folks, one of the things that makes One Rental at a Time a different YouTube channel is we bring in experts and topics from around the investing world. And we have the CEO of Hemlane, Dana Dunford, today. How you doing, Dana?
I'm great. Thanks for having me again, Michael.
You brought a topic today that frankly caught me by surprise, something I've never considered because I just never assumed. So let's get into it, right? A lot of landlords, myself included, when they get a new tenant, we always ask them to sign a 1 year lease. Many landlords, like Dion from Dion Talk, goes for 2 years. But you actually had an entire brain teaser about more and more landlords are going just out of the gate month to month. And I think we should talk about it because I can understand the logic and it's just so different than what I've considered. So what are you seeing? What are you hearing? Why does right out of the gate month to month make sense?
Yeah, so this is really interesting. I never thought about it either. For me, longer leases were better of, hey, reducing the chance of having turnover. Vacancy is one of the worst things for your cash flow because not only do you have the vacancy, the cost of not having a tenant in the property, but you also have repairs, turnovers, leasing fees, all sorts of different things. And so my goal has always been to say, how do you get and structure longer leases that are mutually beneficial? I've had now 5 different real estate investors come to me and say that they actually prefer month to month. And this is over the past 30 days. So this is so recent. And I, of course, asked why. And there were a couple of reasons for it. First, all of these are single family homes.
Okay.
None of them are apartment complexes.
Okay.
And their point was, moving costs are really expensive for tenants. And so for them, moving all of their stuff into this property, having to put new deposits down on new places, they probably don't want to do that. Their goal is actually aligned with mine to rent the place long term.
Mm-hmm.
However, you try to mitigate risk when someone moves in, but you're getting married right away, right? You're signing 12 months with this person, and you can mitigate risk by doing rental verifications, income verifications, making sure employment is stable, checking all these different things, but you never know a relationship unless you're in it.
Yeah.
And so from that perspective, their point of a month to month was, hey, after that, I would actually be willing to sign a 12-month lease and lock them into it. But I want to give this 6 months to see how this goes before I start doing a longer lease.
That is interesting. So it's sort of like going on a date with the tenant for 6 months before you get married. It's not that they're opposed to the year lease. They just want to date first. I get it.
Yeah, they just want to date. And part of the reason is, yeah, you have all of this objective criteria on the tenant, but there are certain situations you might call the past landlord and they might say, yeah, the tenant was great.
Oh,
No
that's never
criteria
happened. A past landlord lies.
you
Dana,
know,
tell me it's
a
not so.
past landlord line, or more often than not, what we find with rental history verification is you can't contact the past landlord. And so all of that is based on saying, hey, we tell the tenants, hey, we want this to be long-term. We want to make sure this is right for you or us, but we don't want to be in a situation of having to get to that, end date. Or sometimes they'll just say, hey, we'll terminate with you with no termination fee, and then have to try to basically go back and forth on that. And so I thought it was a really interesting concept because you're right, Michael, like you could do it after 3 months, you could do it after 6 months, you could do it after 8 months, and then say, hey, now I'm actually going to lock you into a rate. Now do 12 months, but you date before you get married. And with tenant limited law in certain cities and certain states, I didn't think it was a bad idea. So I wanted to run it by you and see what your thoughts were.
Yeah. So again, I've never done it. This, as I said at the open, is a brain teaser. I think it makes a lot of sense. And I absolutely think this is definitely more single family than apartments.
Yeah.
Right. Single families are bigger. You're likely have kids and schools and all that. So, as somebody who has a fair amount of single family rentals, I don't think this is a bad idea at all. I think it's rather creative, especially if you treat it like dating. And then if you like them, you get married. Right. Because you
Yes.
don't have to do month to month for a year. You'll find out the tenant probably in 4 or 5 months. And then you go have a conversation. Hey, do you like, I like you. Do you like me? And if we do, let's sign a lease, or let's sign, maybe that's when you go for the 2-year lease. I like the idea of dating, and it gives both parties. The tenant has power too. It's like, no, I don't like it. It's a little bit, the street's too loud at night, or the neighbor has barking dog, or whatever.
Yeah. And then you
I
don't
think
get
it's
those
good for both.
complaints and neighborhood, drama, etc. Now, what is interesting about it is when you list your property, you don't list it as a month-to-month rental,
Yeah.
because you're going to attract folks who are just looking for short term. And that's not the goal here. You
Right.
list it as a 12-month rental. And then once you get a qualified, objectively qualified tenant, you bring up to them this concept of, hey, our goal is to stay long term with you as well. But why don't we do a month to month to start with and then sign a longer term lease, mutually beneficial on both
Yeah.
sides? Because you get into these situations where, it's just not right and both parties are unhappy, but there's some sort of lease in place, and then there's termination fees and who's going to pay that. And it just gets messy. And so while the chances are rare, you would hope if you qualified the tenants that this would happen, it does help with those
Yeah.
situations of having a professional tenant or something like that, someone like that in your property.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting move. And again, you're right. Down payment, or deposit, deposit, moving costs. That in its effect is the lease, right? That's the security, because they don't want to repeat that twice in a short duration. And again, I actually think this is good for the tenant and the landlord. You get to know each other. Does
Yeah.
the landlord fix stuff? Is he reachable? Is he an arrogant prick? I mean,
Yeah, totally.
I think both parties can win with this. I think it's something I might approach my team with, especially it'll be only on single family homes. I wouldn't do this on an apartment. I think
Yeah.
it makes a lot of sense for single family homes.
Yeah.
Um,
Especially
yeah,
because tenants have that trauma when they first move of how much those moving,
they
how long it
remember.
takes to move. It's like you don't want to move again, but if it is a very miserable situation,
Yeah.
and the two just don't see eye to eye, you can get out of that relationship.
There you go. Well, I thought this was a very interesting brain teaser. Not doing year-long leases out the gate with a tenant. Date first, then get married. Dana, where can people follow you? Because you put out a lot of great content. You have a newsletter there at Hemlane. And where should somebody get the trial?
Yeah, you can go to www.hemlane.com. And we're in the property management space, helping you both find and place a tenant as well as manage the tenant.
Do yourself a favor, get the trial, pretend to be a landlord, get 30 days. Dana has done a script and videos to help you along. Thank you so much.